Emily Meng was born on July 31, 1998. She was a very active teenager in many areas of her life, did well in her studies, loved sports, was a vegetarian, and sang in the church choir. Emily was known as an animal rights activist and as a person who took care of others if they were being bullied or treated unfairly. She was a savior. She was someone who wanted the best for everyone. However, by a fateful coincidence, on the night of July 10, 2016, she disappeared without a trace. Who is to blame? What happened to Emily Meng? The police still have not given an answer to this question. On the night of Sunday, July 10, 2016, 17-year-old Emily Meng was walking with her friends in the city of Slaggelse. They visited a hookah cafe, and before leaving for their hometown of Korsura, they stopped at McDonald's for a bite to eat. The journey from Slaggelse station to Korsur takes about 9 minutes. The girl's phone is almost dead, and during this time she tries to recharge it a little. At about 3:53, the train pulls into the platform. Her friends were planning to take a taxi from the station home and offered Emily to go with them. At first she hesitated, but then firmly said no, citing that she wanted to walk alone. The walk home was about 3 kilometers along a gravel path. They said goodbye, and she left. A few minutes later, her mobile phone switched off. This was the last sign of life for Emily Meng. On Sunday morning, Emily's family discovered that she was not home. The mother did not raise the alarm because she thought that her daughter had already gone to church, where she was supposed to sing in the choir. To make sure that her child was okay, Helen Meng goes to church, but priest Anna Helleberg Klug reports that Emily is not home. Then Helen became wary, because her daughter never misses church singing. The family reports her disappearance to several media outlets and the police. The police accept the report, but they were sure that she would eventually return, because it turned out that she had broken up with her boyfriend the day before and most likely just ran away due to love problems. It was also found that Emily was checking her messages on Facebook Messenger. But, unfortunately, it later turned out that it was her close friend who logged into Emily's account, trying to find out at least something. On Monday, July 11th, a large-scale search begins. The police, more than 400 volunteers, dogs, divers, and a helicopter, search for the 17-year-old girl throughout the city, in forests, lakes, and at sea, since it is a coastal city. At noon, another helicopter is raised. A search is carried out in the parking lot near the Korsur station, where Emily Meng was last seen alive. Here they find some objects, but the police do not say what objects they are talking about. The police also begin to review video footage from Korsur station, Slaggelse station, Roskilde station, and Copenhagen Central station. They search 4 garden associations south of the railway station in Korsur for 2 days, but find no evidence. The missing persons group is engaged in an extensive search, with about 60 volunteer divers looking for Emily Meng in Korsur Nord. In addition to the volunteer divers, the search includes the Navy Home Guard, more than 10 boats, divers from the Copenhagen Fire Brigade, volunteers with drones, volunteers on foot, and horseback riders. The family and the volunteers have set up a fundraiser to raise a reward for any information leading to Emily's whereabouts. On July 22nd, a man was walking his dog. It ran near the railroad tracks and returned to its owner with something resembling blood on its muzzle and paws. The police immediately responded and searched the railroad tracks between Korsur and Svenstrup, but they did not yield any results. During the search, several items were found, such as a bag and a torn black sweater similar to the one Emily had disappeared in. But it turned out that these were unrelated items. The police received dozens of reports that Emily was seen in different parts of the city. They all checked them out, and it turns out that it is not her. But one day, the police receive information that one of the residents heard screams from the basement of his neighbors. They were sure that they were talking to Emily, who was apparently being held captive there. The police raided the home of 67-year-old Finn Peterson, searched everything, dug up the cellar, and searched the walls with heat-sensitive equipment. The searches were carried out 5 times, always without warning, and at different times of the day and night. No trace of Emily was found. Suspicions and charges against Finn Peterson were dropped 2 days after the last search. Emily's mother, Emily Meng, was so desperate to find her daughter that she began her own private investigation into her daughter's disappearance. Hoping to find more witnesses, she took the train from Slagelse to Corsair at night, just like her daughter a month ago. That's how she learned about the courier who picks up newspapers at the station. We later contacted the police and asked them if they knew that a courier picks up newspapers at the station at about this time. They didn't know about it, said Helen. I have not found any information in any of the sources about whether the couriers were checked. After some time, 2 witnesses contacted the police, claiming to have heard a panicked female scream on the morning of July 10th. One of the witnesses, a mentally disabled resident of a boarding school, said he heard the scream that morning while sitting on his balcony overlooking Kodakstion, the place where Emily Meng was supposedly when she disappeared. The second witness, a woman, said she had slept with her window open that night and was awakened early in the morning by a loud, piercing scream. It was such a desperate scream, and at the same time, I heard 1 or more men talking after she screamed, she told one of the Danish news sites, BT, which then conducted an experiment. Several newspaper employees stood on the balcony, and one employee stood by the highway tunnel and screamed at the top of her lungs. A hoarse scream was clearly audible, after which they came to the conclusion that if the witnesses had heard Emily Meng, this gave a clear picture of where the crime against the girl was most likely committed. In October, 3 months after the disappearance, pensioner Erling Jensen contacted the police. He had seen a suspicious white van about 6 kilometers from the station, driving at very high speed through Corsair and further along the motorway. The police began a search for the van. When Jan Jurgensen learned that his car was wanted by the police, he immediately called 114. John had his own company, which in 2016 delivered newspapers to several places in Zealand, including Corsair and near Borup. On July 10, 2016, the company had 3 drivers at work in Corsair. One of them was Jan's brother-in-law, Daniel. He was driving on a route that led through Corsair and down into the forest. According to Jan, it could well have been his white van, which was seen driving around town. But the police also turned their attention to 2 other drivers. One of them was a young driver from the local area who informed Jan on the evening of July 9th that he was ill, but the van was still in his possession. This young man also had a history in his past that made the police deeply interested in him. In 2007, he was convicted of threatening and raping a 12-year-old girl on the island of Jersland. Later, he was also punished for having sex with minors over the internet. After the South Zealand and Lowland Falster police investigated his car movements and allegedly discovered that he had not been in Corsair that night, he was released. But the charges against him remained. And I will say right away that we will return to this person. The other suspected driver was initially hired as a gardener, but he also delivered newspapers from time to time, and he was in Corsair that night. It later emerged that he had a dark past that he had not told Jan about. He turned out to be one of the most notorious pedophiles, but for some reason, The police were not interested in him at first, and a few months later, when they decided to question him, it was too late. He died of cancer. However, as his family later claimed in an interview with a newspaper, the interrogation took place a few days before his death. And, according to the family, he was excluded from the list of suspects because his previous victims were small children, and because it was not possible to say with certainty whether he was in Korsør on the 10th of July, 2016. The police have repeatedly appealed for anyone who saw the white van to come forward. And there have been more witnesses. The woman and her colleague were returning home from work, and as they approached Regnemark Bakke, they were suddenly blinded by the lights of what she describes as a light van. It was parked near a small gravel lot. We noticed the car was standing there, bouncing and swaying, as if someone was having sex, the woman said. Our first thought was to stop and ask them to turn off the lights. But we didn't dare, because we were in Lars Tinskid's fields, and no one would hear us if we screamed, she said. Several runners reported seeing a white van on the southern edge of Korsør. The car was going so fast that they had to jump out of the way to avoid hitting it. Another witness said he turned off the motorway at around 3:15 on the 10th of July 2016 and saw a light vehicle similar to a van parked with its lights on outside a shop on Turnborgve, a few hundred meters from Korsør station. Time passed. No new clues, no sign of Emily. The police began to realize that hope of finding Emily Meng alive was simply fading, and their professional instincts were right. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2016, at about 4 p.m., a man walking his dog along a lake in the village of Regnemark Bakke, which is almost 60 kilometers from Korsør station, smelled a terrible smell. He came closer to the water and saw that the smell was coming from a badly decomposed human body. The next day after the body was found, South Zealand and Lolland Falster police held a press conference to confirm that the body was 17-year-old Emily Meng. She had been missing for 168 days. The police did not disclose the circumstances of the case, but said that Emily was the victim of a crime and suggested that her body was placed in the lake on the day she disappeared. On December 26th, hundreds of people hold a memorial service for Emily Meng. People come and lay flowers at Korsør train station. Slagelse Municipality Mayor Sten Knut V gives a short speech to the crowd. At 12:30, a minute of silence was observed in memory of Emily. A few days later, thousands of torches were lit in the streets of Korsør. Around 2,500 people, shocked by this inhumane act, held a torchlight procession that started at the train station and ended at the Church of St. Povel, where Emily Meng sang in the choir. And 3 weeks later, on January 19th, 2017, Emily Meng was buried in the same Church of St. Povel, where only close friends and family gathered. At the farewell ceremony, Anna Helleberg Klug said, "The grief that she disappeared is over, but it is replaced by the grief of her loss. The anger, injustice, and fear of the unknown evil are of course not over, because the evildoer lives among us." In March 2017, the police receive another tip, and they thoroughly examine the green area near Motalavej in Korsør. They do not give any comments, only say that an investigation is underway. The police do not say whether they have found any concrete evidence. Silence reigns again until June, and only on the 20th, South Zealand and Lolland Falster police announced that, based on surveillance images from Korsør station, they are searching for a Hyundai i30 passenger car, model 2011 to 2016, which they believe is involved in the tragedy. They are asking anyone who may have seen the car to contact the police. The footage shows the car driving from the car park and around the station at 0407 on 10 July 2016, when Emily Meng was last seen alive. In just 24 hours, the police received around 100 requests from potential witnesses. And then, silence again. It was not until the 4th of October, more than 100 days after the video of the car was published, that the police provided information from one of those witnesses. In the early morning of the 10th of July 2016, a woman was driving in the Regnemark Baca area a few hours after Emily Meng disappeared. She was driving behind a tractor and therefore was driving quite slowly. Here she saw, quote, a small to medium-sized passenger car that was parked with the back door open. There was a man standing next to the car, and it looked like he was lifting a heavy object. Based on this information, the police reconstructed the situation and released photos and videos in the hope that other witnesses will come forward. The witness was driving behind the tractor, so the police hope that the same tractor driver will contact them. In addition, according to the witness, there was another car driving behind the tractor. After this, the police receive a call in which the girl claims that she looked into the eyes of Emily Meng's killer, and she is sure of it. The incident she described happened on the same evening, July 10, 2016, when 17-year-old Emily Meng disappeared. She said that on the night from Saturday to Sunday, she was returning from a student party and was waiting for a train in Roskilde, which is an hour's drive from Korsør, to go to Copenhagen. Her friend's uncle gave her a ride to the station, and after he drove away, she realized that she had left her phone in his car. The girl started waving her arms, thinking that she would attract the uncle's attention, but then a Hyundai suddenly drove up to her. The window next to the passenger seat rolled down, and a man, a stocky man, apparently 40 to 50 years old, tall, asked, "Do you need help?" He claimed that he could help, but she had to get into his car. He persuaded her several times and repeated that he would help. The girl, who was about to miss the train to Copenhagen, gave up on the idea of returning her mobile phone that evening and politely declined the man's offer. She runs up to the platform and looks down at the parking lot where she had just spoken to the man in the white car. But the car is gone. The girl remembers how shocked she was that the car had appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as silently. I can't say exactly what it was, but there was something about the man that made me not get into that car. He really wanted to get me into the car. It felt like he was trying to pressure me. I think it's strange to be at the station so late at night. I remember very well that there were no other cars nearby. The girl had forgotten about the incident, but when she saw the picture and description of the car published by the police, her blood ran cold. She has no doubt. It was the same car that had pulled up to her at Roskilde station that same evening, 3 hours earlier. Police find it interesting and call it mysterious that the same type of car is parked at another station for no real purpose on the same evening Emily disappears. I previously reported on a witness who saw a similar car in Regnemarkse Baca. It is not known whether there is a connection between the 3 cars seen in Roskilde, Korsør, and Regnemarkse Baca, but the description of the vehicles, the driver and the date, all have several similarities. The investigation is ongoing, but the police have not made any comments. In 2018, it became known that the notorious submarine builder Peter Madsen was among the suspects. I think everyone knows this gruesome story, but let me refresh your memory. On April 25, 2018, Madsen was convicted of the brutal murder and dismemberment of journalist Kim Wall on board his submarine. He was sentenced to the harshest penalty under the law: life imprisonment. Exactly why and how he became the focus of the police in the Emily Meng case is not reported. However, In the eyes of the police, it is natural, when faced with an unsolved murder case, to look at who else could have committed such a serious crime. Madsen also knows the Korsør area well. He spent his entire childhood in Skelskør and Hunjo, which are located south and north of Korsør on Zealand's west coast. His mother, with whom he had little contact, lived in Korsør for many years, less than a kilometer from the home of Emily Meng's mother and stepfather. It is known that in the months before Emily's disappearance, he had traveled around Zealand in search of a new berth for his submarine. One of the ports he considered was Korsør Harbor, where the submarine would be conveniently located near the naval base. Madsen's partner, Stein Lork, said that they had indeed planned to base the boat there, but in the end they chose another port further north. Madsen also owned a white van, similar to one seen in several locations in Korsør on the night Emily disappeared. How far the police have gone or will go in investigating Madsen's possible role in Emily's case is still unknown. However, a survey conducted by the BT editorial team among Peter's closest friends and relatives shows that the police did not ask them for information about his actions on July 10, 2016. The police also did not contact his longtime friend Jens Falkenberg, who built submarines with him, and he is slightly surprised by the interest of law enforcement in Peter and the suspicions against him in the Emily case. Despite his life sentence, Jens has maintained friendship with Peter and regularly visits him in prison. He believes that what Peter did to Kim was not murder. It was an accident, and he simply lost his head. And the fact that he could have been involved in the Emily case is completely excluded. But still, the police interest in Madsen has been constant for some time, and they returned to him twice after checking something. On Sunday, August 11, 2019, an anonymous letter was dropped off at the door of the BT publishing house at night. It contained information about the Emily Meng case. The letter consisted of 2 printed A4 pages, and the person who wrote it claimed to have very interesting information about an unsolved murder. The person also wrote that he doubted whether the police would take it seriously, so he wrote to the editor. After careful consideration, BT management decided to pass the letter on to the police. After this, the police chief, Lars Harvest, did not want to give an interview, but in a written response he thanked for the letter, which served as the basis for a number of investigative actions. Also in 2019, Emil Sandvad, the same young truck driver, was sentenced to prison for depriving, raping, and threatening a 9th girl in northern Jutland. When the detention order was appealed to a higher court, Sandvad admitted that on 30 August 2016, 51 days after Emily disappeared, he called the police in South Zealand and Lolland Falster to report his involvement in her case. However, his mother and wife believe that he simply incriminated himself and voluntarily admitted guilt in the murder. The mother wrote to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice, and the officials of the parties, calling the verdict a miscarriage of justice and arguing for her son's innocence. The mother and wife said that they had received a threatening letter. They are convinced that there is someone out there who wants to take revenge on him for what he did in 2007, as I have discussed previously. They believe that the author of the letter not only convicted Emil of rape, but also informed the police that Emil may be connected to the Emily Meng case. Over the 4 years of the investigation, enormous resources have been devoted to solving it. More than 5,200 police reports and 75 large files have been filed in the Emily Meng case. More than 4,000 people are involved, almost everyone in Denmark has had their DNA tested, and at least 200 people have been thoroughly examined. How many of them are suspects in the murder, Lars Harvest cannot say for sure, since it depends on what is meant by suspect. Although more than 4 years have passed since Emily Meng disappeared, the case is still under investigation. However, the police still do not say how and under what circumstances Emily died. The police also admit that they did not take important investigative steps at the initial stage of the investigation. And this is true. When they were searching for the white van, for some reason, they did not check the video footage from the surveillance cameras that are directed at the two roads leading from Korsør to Borup, where it would be possible to see whether the white van was on either of these two roads. Around the time of the crime, the police received data on active phones in the area as part of the so-called masked case. But later, technical experts discovered that there was a gap of more than an hour in the data. According to TV analyst Torben Rune, in the Emily Meng case, the police have the opportunity to look even deeper into the data from the towers. The location of Emily Meng is special because there is very poor mobile coverage there, and if the perpetrator walked around there with his phone on, he would notice some special shifts between the masts that cover this area. A shift that will only happen in a few places near this area. So, if the perpetrator was walking around there with his mobile phone on, it is only a matter of time before he is discovered. Emily's disappearance is one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in modern Denmark. Denmark is considered a safe place to live, but like any other country, murders happen. There are usually between 25 and 60 murders a year, often gang-related or committed by someone the victim knows. This case is therefore considered special because to this day, there are more questions than answers, and the killer is still at large.